Hello, good afternoon. Shall we study the Bible together again? Now, today we'd like to study from the First Samuel chapter 17. This is somewhat famous verse in the Bible. This is like a fight between David and the Goliath, and probably most of you knew about this story. But let me read First Samuel chapter 17. Okay, if you open your Bible, please do. Chapter 17, the First Samuel chapter 17. Let me read this. All right. Now the Philistines gathered their force for war and assembled at the Soko in Judah. They pitched camp at the Ephes-Dammim between Soko and Azekam. Saul and Israel assembled and camped in the valley of Elam and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israeli others, with a valley between them. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubit and span. That means like 3 meters. Gigantic guy, isn't it? He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of skull armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. 5,000 shekels is about like 60 kilograms, so it's like a one adult human person's. The armor itself is weight that heavy. On his legs, he wore bronze glaives, and the bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear, his spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. So this guy, the gigantic guy, came with enemy's camp. There is Philistine in the one side of hills and Israeli in the other side of hills, and the valley between. And the Goliath came, gigantic guy. And the Goliath even had his own. Somebody's carrying his own shield. He's not even carrying his own shield. He's just that gigantic guy. Verse 8. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not a servant of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subject. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subject and serve us." Then the Philistines said, "This day I defy the army of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' word, Saul and all the Israeli were dismayed and terrified. Now here, the Goliath came out, and everyone, Saul, the king of Israel, and also all the Israeli was so terrified. The Bible said they're so afraid of this guy. And verse 12. Now David. From here, the David that showed up in the story. Now David was the son of Ephrathi, the name Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse had 8 sons, and in Saul's time he was very old. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to the war. The firstborn was Eliab, the second Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul's to tend his father's sheep at the Bethlehem. For 40 days, the Philistine came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. Now here, David, he was youngest. Now we know that how David died and what year that he died. So from that, we can kind of estimate how old he was this time. Most of the scholars believe that he was around 17 years old, and when this event took place. So now the 17 years old David, and he had like 8 brothers, and the 3 oldest, I think they were probably the old enough to go to the war, probably like late 20s, I believe. They are in the war, but David wasn't. They was way too young. He was around 17. And but it's interesting is that this Philistine with the Goliath, the 40 days he was kind of mocking the Israeli group. In the Bible, the number 40 often used to indicate the time of the God's like a trial, or when the God gave us some test. The number 40 always often used in the time of difficulty that we have to face and so on. But usually after 40 days, God will give the answer. Now the verse 17, he said, "Now Jesse said to his son David, take this ephah of the roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brother and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brother are and bring back some assurance from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elam fighting against the Philistine." It's interesting that where the David is in the Bethlehem and where the battle, the place taking the battle, is about like a 20 to 25 kilometer. So that's about like about 4 or 5 hours, maybe 4 hours by walk. So if the David left his place early in the morning, he can arrive the battle's scene probably like around noonish. And so his father asked David to bring like a lunch for his brothers. And also it's interesting, his father, that Jesse asked David to bring some souvenir or some gift to the commander, like a cheese. So that's exactly what the David did. And so now David, now going to the battle place, just bring the lunch for his brother. Verse 20. Early in the morning, David left the flock in the care of the shepherd, loaded up and set up. And as Jesse had directed, he reached the camp as army was going out to its battle position, shouting the war cry. Israeli and the Philistine were drawing up their lines facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of the supplies and ran to the battle lines and asked his brother how they were. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his line and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. Whenever the Israelis saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. So obviously, the Israeli group of Saul and Israel, they are so terrified and they fear. They are so afraid about this man, and that for sure. Verse 25. Now Israel had been saying, "Do you see how this man keep coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give the great wealth to the men who kill him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his family from the tax in Israel." David asked the man standing near him, "What will be done for the man who killed this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine, and that he should defy the army of living God?" They repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, "This is what will be done for the man who killed him." When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. Now David said, "Now what have I done?" said David. "Can I even speak?" And he then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the man answered him before. And now here comes interesting. Apparently David wasn't afraid at all about the Goliath, and when the Goliath came, and David said, "Who is that uncircumcised idiot?" sort of, and keep defining the Israel, and also David keeps saying God, this is God's army, and why these uncircumcised guys came and saying bad things about living God or His army. And interesting is the oldest brother. Usually the oldest brother has always very responsible person usually is, and he saw that his youngest brother is only 17 years old at that time, David. So that Elinab, his brothers, was very angry, and the Eliab told David, "Why in the world are you saying? Why did you come here?" He was saying that you go home and you just kept the sheep to somebody else. Why you came here? You just came here to watch us. So Dave, like a youngest son, 17 years old, he said, "What? What I done? I didn't do anything. Can I say anything? Can I say any word?" I guess the young son was 17 years old kids will say that. Younger brother will say such things. So that's what's happening. And then now let's see how far I read. And then verse 29. Now that I have, what have I done? Said David. I cannot even speak. He then turned away to someone else and brought up in the same matter, and the man answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." David said, he shouldn't have said it, but he said it. He said to the king Saul, and said, "Hey, I will fight this idiot," so to speak. And verse 33, Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been the warrior from his youth." Yeah, I kind of understand. Saul look at this young kid and the 17 years old boy, and he was so hyped up, and he said to the king, said, "Hey, I'm the one going to kill these guys." The Saul, so wait a minute, you can't do that. You're just only young boy. He's like a high school kid. It's not fit for the fight. So he said, "You're too young." So yeah, I would say that. But verse 34, but David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep, and when a lion or bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it and struck it and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both lions and bear. These uncircumcised Philistines will be like one of them, because he had defied the army of living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and paw of the bear will rescue me from the hands of Philistine." And Saul said to David, "Go, and Lord be with you." Now, interesting is David told Saul, "Hey, I can do it. I killed lions and bears, and God will help me killing this Philistine." And somehow Saul, I guess, I don't know, Saul being convinced probably. Saul said, okay. Well, maybe Saul, well, if this young boy died, that's okay, maybe. I'm not sure what it was, but actually Saul permitted David to fight with the Goliath. And as a fact, in the Bible, Saul was supposed to be Saul was tallest among the Israelis. So if it's a battle, if it's the right person to fight, it should be Saul to fight against the Goliath from the Israeli. And after all, he was a king. But Saul so chickened up, and David was the only one apparently here is very brave, and he's not afraid at all about Goliath. So the Saul let David to wear his armor, and almost like treated David as like a king or like a Saul himself. But so the Saul said to David, "Go, and Lord be with you." Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of the armor on him and bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. Then David said, I cannot go in this, he said to Saul, because I am not used to them. Well, it sounds like a 17-year-old boy say. I mean, usually the most of a man, if the king let you borrow king's armor, you say, oh, it's so honored to have your armor, or like, oh, thank you, the king. But Dave, I mean, he's only 17. He would just simply say, I cannot wear these things. I mean, this is too heavy and just so clumsy. I just want to do it. Well, sounds like, so David said, I cannot go in these, he said to Saul, because I am not used to them. So he took them off, and then he took his stuff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in his pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling on his hand, approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, who is with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to Dave. He looked Dave over and saw that he was little more than a boy, growing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, am I a dog that you came at me with the sticks? And the Philistine cursed David with his gods. Came here, he said, and I will give you flesh. I will give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. David said to the Philistine, you came against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I came against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the army of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcass of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by the sword or spear that Lord saves for the battle. Lord says, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. Now here, the David definitely a very brave, and he's the only one not afraid. And most of all, his point is, after everyone's so terrified, afraid about Goliath, the Goliath even pray their gods. But Dave said, hey, this is not the battle for me. This is a battle, it's a Lord's battle. It is actually God is fighting against Goliath. And David was very confident about his trust and belief in God. And that is definitely one thing is very, very different from the rest of his people around. And verse 48. As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. And the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and stone without a sword in his hand. He struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over him, and he took hold of Philistine's sword and drew it from the chest. After he killed him, he cut off his head with a sword. When the Philistines saw that their hero was died, they turned and ran. Well, interesting is obviously David wasn't afraid at all, and obviously David believed in God that deliver him from the Philistines and the Goliath. I was just wondering, after I read this story, even though this is a very famous story, I just wonder that Satan, the devil, indeed kind of make us worry or terrify us in the world. Usually this type of, I would say like bullying, that devil use physical violence to sometimes make us worry or concern. everywhere you go, you might see a guy like a Goliath. Maybe at the school, like high school, junior high school, there's some kind of big guy, like a Goliath, bullying. Sometimes they do that, and or there's something like called domestic violence. Like sometimes, like physically strong person, like a father, usually beat his wife, or sometimes their children's. They call the domestic violence. You will see like organized crime, like gangs, or like in Japan, like yakuza. So, for example, they use the same tactic. They use physically, they will just threaten people and make them like so afraid of them, and they do that now. It's not only those groups, I would say even authority, even government sometimes use the force to make people so afraid against them. And this may happen in a company as well. Like sometimes like a president of the company is so bully, so unreasonable. Sometimes makes all the workers so afraid that they will lose their job if they don't listen to the president or even the boss. So that they will just subordinate have to obediently follow the boss, even though they knew sometimes the boss doing something wrong. This kind of bullying is happening everywhere in the world, in a workplace or a school, maybe even in the church, I wonder. Now, the Satan, I think it is his very prime method to make us, keep us under the slave of a fear and worry. And as a fact, we're under the very dark world. In the world, if you see, it looks very bright and very nice. Like if I go to downtown Osaka, it's a very neon sign, everywhere beautiful. But right behind there, if you go to any narrow street, any place, there is some dark world going. People are actually afraid against the violence, and they are being bullied, and maybe organized crime is actually exists, and making kept people under the fear. And this is the devil's world. In the Japanese proverbs, is a nail sticking out will be pounded in. I think this is almost like a tallest tree will get some wind, strong wind, or something like that. That if you are in organizations, even though your boss or leader or president doing something wrong, maybe people say, well, it's much safer to you put your head down. Just won't say it. You're so afraid doing something right, or sometimes you're very afraid of doing right because of it's much. We just that's a world. So our world is actually totally occupied and controlled and ruled by devil, the Satan. And then the tactic devil always use is something called fear. Make us fearful, terrified, and often used by violence. The devil use. Just think about how you grew up in your life, and have you ever seen that? Like somebody tried to terrify you by force, actually, and you just cannot say it, and you're so terrified. This is the world we actually live, and there's no answer to it. Now, David, however, the one thing is he was so different. If you just open like a one page a little before the chapter 17, chapter 16 and 1 Samuel, if you take a look, the 16 verse 6, chapter 16 verse 6. Now let me read this, what it said. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord look at the heart. Now what it is Samuel, the priest, was asked by God to go to the David's house, and David had 8 brothers. And first Samuel saw the Eliab. Do you remember the oldest son? And Samuel saw that Eliab is the one that the God anointed as the next king after Saul. But the God told the Samuel that Eliab is not the ones, and actually God does not look at the outside appearance, but God look at the heart. Now, so God looked at David. He was a young boy that time, and David had the right heart. And also the verse 13, if you look at it, and chapter 16, verse 13. So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him. This him means David, in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon the David. Samuel then went to Ramah. Now, David, on the other hand, the Spirit of God, the Lord, is upon the David. So David had two things different. He had a right mind, and also the Spirit of God was upon David and possessed on David. Now, this makes very different. I just wonder, what or who is a Goliath for you? What is Goliath? What you're afraid of? Who are you very much afraid of? Maybe there's something like you're afraid of losing job. Maybe you're afraid of paying next payment, or maybe you're afraid of actually some physical violence. I don't know what you're afraid of, but what are you afraid of living in this world? Now, one thing's for sure, in this story, we can see that God, the mighty God, actually prepared David. Now, David, since he was a little boy, he had to take care of the sheep. And as he was doing it, I guess a bear or lions came out, and probably the first he was so afraid of them, and maybe he just threw the rock like this, and then maybe the bear will chase after David. Maybe Dave have to run or something. But more and more, Dave attended the sheep. He started to learn how to chase the lions and bears away, and eventually, Dave learned how to kill the moving target. Actually, it's very difficult to throw the rock against the moving target, but Dave actually learned how to kill lions and bear. And so definitely you can see throughout the many years as David grew up as a shepherd, that God prepared this particular day, or particular this incident. God prepared David able to fight against a Goliath. And also, have you noticed that Goliath didn't have his own shield? There's somebody else's. Goliath was so confident, so boring, and probably the guy like Goliath, so big guy, that from the day he was kind of grew up in a little child, he was probably boring everybody. The way the Goliath acted, he's a typical the guy who does bullying, and he was so confident, so he even didn't have his own shield. He just let somebody else's carry his shield. So when the David sling a stone, if the Goliath had the shield, he can protect himself. There's a rock coming out, and he's like, he can protect by his own shield. But Goliath couldn't do that because somebody else carrying the shield. Is this accidental, or this just happened to be that way? I believe that God did so. God made Goliath kind of carry his shield to somebody else. What I mean is, sometimes God does things that beyond our human comprehension, but the fact is, God prepared for this battle. And God knows we're going to win, or David going to win. And now, this something like remind me, like a pound of maybe metal is steel is very cheap, maybe a few bucks, I guess. But the same pound of steel, if you pound on it and if you kind of pressed and you kind of formed and many process, you maybe like put the metal over it, and you maybe cast, and you maybe get the heat treatments and so on. This little metal eventually can become very expensive component parts for the very expensive like a watch, for example. Like maybe watch costs like a $2,000 watch, but inside have a little tiny metal. Could have been used to be a very cheap, but in the many pounding, many process, that this metal become very valuable and be used for high things. We are like that too. God does pound us and mold us and give us the heat treatments, and we have to go through many process and be prepared, just like God prepared David, and we have to go through the many difficult time, but eventually we'll be prepared when we go to the battle. But who preparing us is God himself. And but even though I wonder are we afraid? Maybe we're very afraid, aren't we? I can give you another example that this is my own story. Like when I was 5 or 6 years old, like I guess I was like a kindergarten or elementary school, the first grade. I had to swim like 25 meters, and somehow I don't know what kind of day it was. Probably like a athletic day or a physical day. I'm not sure what it is, or parents' day. I remember my parents was there, and then so many people, my brother and all my family, and then bunch of people was there at the swimming pool, 25-meter swimming pool. I had to swim, and I know I kind of able to make it, or I'm not sure that I can make it. Sometimes I can make it. The 25-meter, the 5 years old boy, it was very, very long, and now I went and swim, and then just swim like this, and I just started drinking lots of waters, and then all of a sudden the pool, that's supposed to be a very small pool, but pool become gigantic to me, and I don't know where I was, and I just keep swimming, and every time I put my head up in the water, I can hear the people say, Kenji, 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 but as soon as I put my head under the water, now it's totally silent, and it's just amazing, and I'm just so desperate, and I just didn't know where I was, and as I was swimming, the goal seems I cannot able to reach the goal. I don't know where the goal was, and I keep swimming. At that time, I was 5 or 6 years old. I remember that I become kind of hopeless, and I thought, oh, I'm so tired. I cannot do it. Maybe I cannot do it. I really cannot do it. Then I stood up. Then when I stood up in the pool, I found the goal is only like 1 meter or so away. I was almost there. Soon as I stood up, I heard my parents and everybody say, "Oh, Kenji." I remember that scene, and I just couldn't believe it. It's just a little bit. If I just kick a little bit more, I could have been gone. But I was so hopeless. I just wonder, our life like that maybe. You're suffering, and maybe, you're so hopeless right now. But don't forget, God is always with us. And, but sometimes we're so afraid. Now, because we are under this darkness, the God Himself felt so sorry for us. He was felt so bad about that we don't have any answer against this evil world. So He decided to become a man, and He took all our sorrow and worry. He Himself took it and cast that on the cross. So if we believe in Jesus as living God, and indeed He gave us eternal life, and we don't have to worry about future. And He not only He gave us eternal life, He also gave us He going to reside with us. His Spirit going to reside with us. So just like David. So we really don't have to worry, But then sometimes we worry too much. Let me ask you, if there's the insurance, the insurance is actually the business of a worry, so to speak. You worry and you join the insurance. But if somebody said to you, hey, if you pay $100, this insurance policy is if you pay $100, you get eternal life. You will never die. Will you buy it? I mean, I would. $100. I mean, I don't have much money, but I would gather $100 somewhere, and I would pay. Hey, I don't have to die once I bought this insurance. Now, fact is, the gospel is totally free. It doesn't even cost $100. All you have to do is believe in Jesus, and He is God Himself become a man, and He can give you eternal life. And not only that, as a David, the Holy Spirit will reside with us. And after that, after we totally trust in God, through the prayer, God does miracles through our life, and we can win over the Satan, and we don't have to fear this dark world. We will be the light in the darkness, the salt on the earth. But if we are fear, and if we are worried, if we forgot that God is with us, we cannot be. We just like a salt without saltness, and we'll be step on by the people, and worthless will be. So as a Christian, I would suggest we'll be brave, like a David did. Shall we pray? And after all, it is a God. He's the one fighting. All right. Well, thank you for today's message, and thank you for teaching us your word today. Sometimes we are so afraid, and Satan indeed wants us to be so afraid, and so we kind of hide away. But the fact is, you are with us, and please make us brave so we can proclaim your gospel to the people with a brave and confidence. Lord, please make us brave so that we can tell the right things in the right place in this dark world. You're always with us, and thank you for today's teaching. Jesus, we pray. Amen. All right. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.